A night to remember. Ruby Thompson had always prided herself on being professional. She kept her personal life separate from work, never mixed business with pleasure, and certainly never made mistakes that could cost her job. But tonight, as she stumbled through the elegant hallways of the Ocean Pearl Resort in Miami, she was about to break all those rules in the most embarrassing way possible. The evening had started innocently enough. Her boss, Jameson Blake, had just closed a major deal with tech investors worth millions. The celebration dinner at the beachfront restaurant was supposed to be a simple toast to success. Ruby had attended hundreds of business dinners before. She knew how to smile politely, make small talk, and leave at the appropriate time. What she had not expected was for Jameson to actually relax for once in his life. The celebration gone wrong. Man who usually treated emotions like unnecessary business expenses was laughing, actually laughing. Ruby watched in amazement as her normally stone-faced boss shared jokes with the investors and even complimented the seafood. She had worked for him for 3 years and had never seen him this loose. "You should try this wine, Ruby," Jameson said, gesturing to the server. "We deserve to celebrate tonight." Ruby hesitated. She was not much of a drinker, but the atmosphere was infectious. The ocean breeze, the success of the deal, and the rare sight of Jameson being almost human made her lower her guard. 1 glass turned into 2, 2 turned into 4. Before she knew it, Ruby was engaged in a friendly debate with Jameson about the best pizza toppings, something she'd never imagined discussing with her intimidating boss.
"Apple does not belong on pizza," Jameson stated firmly.
His words slightly slurred. "That is just wrong," Ruby shot back, pointing at him with her fork. "Pineapple adds a perfect sweet contrast." The investors around them chuckled at the exchange. For once, Ruby and Jameson were not talking about quarterly reports or client meetings. They were just 2 people enjoying a moment. The wrong door as the night wore on. Ruby realized she had drunk far more than she intended. Her head felt light, and the room seemed to tilt slightly when she stood up. "I should head to my room," she announced, grabbing her purse. Jameson nodded, also rising from his seat. "Good idea. Big day tomorrow." They left the restaurant separately. But Ruby soon found herself wandering the hotel corridors with no clear idea of where she was going. The hallway stretched endlessly before her, and the room numbers seemed to dance and blur. Room 412, or was it 421? Maybe 214? She muttered to herself, squinting at the brass numbers on each door. Then she saw it. A door slightly ajar, as if inviting her in. In her wind-clouded mind, this seemed like a sign from the universe itself. Thank goodness, she sighed with relief, pushing the door open. The room was dark and quiet. Ruby kicked off her heels, dropped her purse on the floor, and collapsed onto the massive bed. The mattress was incredibly soft, like sinking into a cloud.
"Best hotel ever,"
she mumbled before sleep claimed her completely. The morning after, Jameson Blake woke up with a strange sensation. Something was different. His usual wake-up routine involved silence, solitude, and a strong cup of black coffee. But this morning he felt warmth next to him, breathing, movement. His eyes snapped open. There, sleeping peacefully beside him, with her dark hair spread across his pillow, was Ruby Thompson, his executive assistant. The woman who organized his entire life, the person he trusted to handle his most confidential business matters. And she was in his bed. Jameson lay frozen, trying to process what he was seeing. His mind raced through the previous night. He remembered the dinner, the wine, the laughter, but he had no memory of Ruby coming to his room. In fact, he was certain he had gone to bed alone. Ruby shifted in her sleep, her arm draping across his chest. Jameson stared at the ceiling as if seeking divine intervention. "This cannot be happening," he whispered. Before he could figure out his next move, Ruby began to wake up. She stretched lazily, a content smile on her face, completely unaware of the disaster unfolding around her. "Best sleep ever," she murmured, her eyes still closed. Then she turned, and her hand touched something solid. Something warm. Something that definitely was not a pillow. Her eyes flew open. The first thing she saw was a muscular chest rising and falling with steady breaths. The second thing she saw was Jameson Blake staring at her with an expression of complete shock. The panic sets. In Ruby's brain took exactly 3 seconds to process the situation. Then she screamed and tumbled out of bed, landing on the floor in a tangle of sheets. "What are you doing in my room?" she gasped, her heart pounding. Jameson sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Ruby, this is my room." She blinked rapidly, looking around the space with growing horror. The dark blue curtains, the leather chair in the corner, the perfectly folded suit hanging by the closet. This was definitely not her room. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. Ruby covered her face with her hands. I walked into the wrong room. Jameson crossed his arms, studying her with a mixture of confusion and something that might have been amusement. That much is obvious. "I did not do this on purpose," Ruby said quickly, panic rising in her voice. "I was confused." The wine. The hallways all looked the same. "I figured as much," Jameson replied calmly. "Otherwise, I would have already called security." Ruby felt her face burning with embarrassment. Of all the horrible, mortifying situations she could imagine, this topped the list. She had accidentally slept in her boss's bed. Her very attractive, very intimidating, very off-limits boss. The close call before either of them could say another word, a knock sounded at the door. "Mr. Blake? Are you awake?" Ruby recognized the voice immediately. It was Patricia Green, one of the senior investors from last night. She looked at Jameson with wide, terrified eyes. He looked back at her with the same expression. "Hide," he mouthed silently. "Where?" Ruby mouthed back frantically. Jameson pointed under the bed. Without thinking, Ruby dove beneath it, pressing herself flat against the carpet just as Jameson opened the door. "Patricia, good morning," he said smoothly, as if he had not just had his assistant hiding under his bed. "Good morning, Jameson. I wanted to discuss the contract terms before breakfast. Do you have a moment?" Ruby held her breath, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain Patricia could hear it. "Actually, I need to get ready." "Can we talk over breakfast instead?" Jameson suggested. "Of course. I will see you downstairs in 30 minutes." The moment the door closed, Ruby crawled out from under the bed, her hair a mess and her dignity completely gone. The agreement Jameson turned to face her, his expression serious now. "We need to agree on something right now." Ruby nodded frantically. "Absolutely." "What?" "This never happened. No one can ever know about this. Not Patricia, not the other investors, and definitely not anyone at the office." "Agreed," Ruby said immediately. "I will take this secret to my grave." Jameson studied her for a moment longer. "You were smiling this morning. When you first woke up," Ruby froze. "What?" "You smiled. Like you had the best sleep of your life." Her face turned bright red. "That means nothing." "I was unconscious. People smile in their sleep all the time, if you say so," Jameson replied. But there was a hint of something in his voice that Ruby could not quite identify. She grabbed her shoes and purse, desperate to escape. "I am leaving now. Right now. And we will never speak of this again. Good plan." Ruby practically ran to the door, but just as she reached for the handle, Jameson called her name. "Ruby." She stopped but did not turn around. "Yes. If you plan on walking into the wrong room again tonight, at least knock first." Ruby whipped around, shocked. "Are you joking?" Jameson's expression remained neutral. "Maybe." She glared at him, but despite everything, she felt a strange flutter in her stomach. "I am never drinking around you again." And with that, she fled from the room, determined to forget this entire morning ever happened. But deep down, Ruby knew that forgetting Jameson Blake was going to be much harder than she thought. The proposition Ruby spent the entire morning avoiding. Jameson Blake. She sat at the opposite end of the conference room during the investor meeting, kept her eyes glued to her tablet during lunch, and practically sprinted in the other direction whenever she saw him approaching. The problem was that avoiding your boss when you were his executive assistant was nearly impossible. By late afternoon, Ruby received a text message that made her stomach drop. "Meet me on the terrace in 10 minutes. We need to talk. This is not optional. Ruby considered pretending she had not seen the message. She considered faking a sudden illness. She even considered booking an immediate flight back home. But none of those options would actually solve anything. 10 minutes later, she found herself on the hotel terrace, where Jameson stood looking out at the Miami skyline. He had changed into a casual button-down shirt and dark jeans, looking far less intimidating than his usual business suits made him appear. "You wanted to see me?" Ruby asked, keeping her distance. Jameson turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "We have a problem." Ruby's heart sank. "If this is about this morning, I already apologized. It was an accident. A terrible, embarrassing accident that will never happen again." "It is about this morning, but not in the way you think," Jameson said. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Someone saw you leaving my room." The rumor milled the blood drained from Ruby's face. "Who?" "Trevor Martinez, one of the junior investors. He was getting coffee early and saw you rushing out of my hallway looking disheveled." Ruby wanted to disappear into the ground. "What did he say?" "He did not say anything to me directly, but I overheard him talking to Patricia. They think we are in a relationship." "That is ridiculous," Ruby said quickly. "We can just tell them the truth. That I was drunk and walked into the wrong room by mistake. Nothing happened." Jameson raised an eyebrow. "Do you really think they will believe that?" Ruby opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. He was right. The truth sounded even more unbelievable than the rumor. "So what do we do?" she asked quietly. Jameson walked closer to her, his eyes locked on hers. "I have a proposal, one that might actually benefit both of us." Ruby crossed her arms defensively. "I am listening." The investors from the Caldwell Group have been hesitant about the merger. They value stability, trust, and personal connections in their business partners. When Patricia mentioned the rumor about us to me privately, she seemed pleased. She said seeing me in a committed relationship made her more confident about the partnership. Ruby stared at him. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious," Jameson said. "If we pretend to be in a relationship for the rest of this trip, it could secure the final contract. The Caldwell Group will sign, and the deal will be complete." The deal. Ruby took a step back, her mind racing. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" "Just for 3 more days. We attend the social events together, act like a couple in front of the investors. And once the contract is signed, we quietly break up after we return home. No one at the office needs to know. It will just be a brief relationship that did not work out." "This is insane," Ruby muttered, pacing back and forth. "What if someone figures out we are faking it?" "They would not. You are smart, quick on your feet, and honestly. After 3 years of working together, we already know each other better than most real couples." Ruby stopped pacing and looked at him. "Why me? You could date any woman you want. Why not just find someone real?" Jameson's jaw tightened slightly. "Because I do not have time for real relationships. Because this situation fell into our laps whether we wanted it or not. And because I trust you, Ruby. I trust you more than anyone else in my professional life." Those words hit Ruby harder than she expected. Jameson Blake did not give out compliments easily, and he certainly did not talk about trust lightly. "If I agree to this," Ruby said slowly, "we need rules. Clear boundaries." "Agreed. No one at the office can ever find out. This ends the moment we leave Miami, and we keep everything professional. No crossing lines." Jameson nodded. "Understood. Do we have a deal?" Ruby took a deep breath. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. But another part of her, the part that had felt something unexpected this morning when she woke up next to him, was curious. "Fine. I will do it. But if this goes wrong, you are taking full responsibility." A rare smile crossed Jameson's face. "Fair enough." The first test that evening, Ruby found herself getting ready for a cocktail party with the investors. She chose an elegant burgundy dress that was professional but flattering, and spent extra time on her hair and makeup. If she was going to pretend to be Jameson Blake's girlfriend, she needed to look the part. When she stepped into the hotel lobby, Jameson was already waiting. His eyes traveled over her slowly, and for a moment something flickered in his expression. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Ruby felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." Jameson offered his arm, and Ruby took it, feeling the solid strength beneath his suit jacket. They walked into the party together, and immediately heads turned. Patricia Green approached them with a knowing smile. "Jameson, Ruby, how wonderful to see you both. I must say, you make a lovely couple." Ruby forced herself to smile naturally. "Thank you, Patricia. That is very kind. How long have you two been together?" Trevor Martinez asked, joining the conversation with obvious curiosity. Ruby's mind went blank. They had not discussed this detail, but Jameson smoothly jumped in. "About 6 months. We kept it quiet because of work, but we decided life is too short to hide what makes us happy." He looked down at Ruby as he said this, and the warmth in his eyes was so convincing that even Ruby almost believed him. Unexpected chemistry throughout the evening. Ruby and Jameson played their roles perfectly. He kept his hand on the small of her back as they moved through the crowd. She laughed at his jokes and touched his arm during conversations. To everyone watching, they were a couple genuinely in love, but what surprised Ruby was how easy it felt. There was no awkwardness, no forced gestures. Every touch, every glance seemed to flow naturally between them. During dinner, they sat side by side, and Jameson leaned close to whisper in her ear, "You are doing great. They completely believe us." His breath against her skin sent shivers down her spine. "You are pretty convincing yourself." "Maybe I am a better actor than I thought," he murmured, but something in his tone made Ruby wonder if he was still acting. After dinner, the group moved to the outdoor lounge area overlooking the ocean. The sound of waves mixed with soft music and conversation. Ruby stood at the railing, taking a moment to herself, when Jameson joined her. "Overwhelmed?" he asked quietly, little Ruby admitted. "This is all very strange." "Strange how?" She hesitated, then decided to be honest. "It does not feel as fake as I thought it would." Jameson was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I know what you mean." Before Ruby could respond, Patricia approached them again. "You two should dance. The music is lovely tonight." Ruby's eyes widened slightly, but Jameson smoothly took her hand. "Great idea." He led her to the small dance area where a few other couples swayed to the soft jazz music. Jameson pulled Ruby close, one hand on her waist, the other holding her hand gently. They almost kissed. They moved together slowly, when Ruby was acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. Jameson was a surprisingly good dancer, leading her confidently across the floor. "Where did you learn to dance?" Ruby asked, trying to distract herself from how fast her heart was beating. "My mother insisted on lessons when I was young. I hated it then, but I suppose it is coming in handy now." Ruby smiled. "I never pictured you as a kid taking dance lessons." "There is a lot you do not know about me," Jameson said, his voice lower now. "Maybe you should tell me. If we are supposed to be dating, I should probably know more than just your coffee order." Jameson's lips curved slightly. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," Ruby said before she could stop herself. Something shifted in Jameson's expression. His hand on her waist tightened slightly, pulling her closer. Ruby's breath caught as the space between them disappeared. "Ruby," he said quietly, his eyes dropping to her lips. She knew what was about to happen. She could see it in his eyes, feel it in the way he held her. Jameson Blake was going to kiss her. And the terrifying part was that she wanted him to. But just as he started to lean down, someone called out to them. "Jameson." "Ruby, come join us for photos." The moment shattered. Jameson stepped back quickly, and Ruby felt both relieved and disappointed. They walked over to the group, smiling for pictures, but Ruby's mind was spinning. That almost kiss was not part of the act. That was real, and it changed everything. Late-night confessions later that night, Ruby walked back to her room in a daze. She changed into comfortable clothes and tried to sleep. But her mind refused to quiet down. Around midnight, her phone buzzed with a text from Jameson. "Are you awake?" Ruby stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "Yes. Why? Can we talk?" "Meet me on the beach." Every sensible part of Ruby's brain told her to say no. Nothing good could come from meeting her fake boyfriend on a romantic beach at midnight. But she found herself putting on a sweatshirt and heading downstairs anyway. Jameson was waiting by the water's edge, his hands in his pockets, looking out at the dark ocean. He turned when he heard her approach. "Could not sleep either?" Ruby asked. "Too much on my mind," Jameson admitted. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the waves. "Out earlier," Jameson started, then stopped. "When you almost kissed me," Ruby finished for him. He looked at her, surprised by her directness. "Yes, that were you acting?" Ruby asked, her heart pounding. Jameson held her gaze. "No, I was not." The honesty in his voice took Ruby's breath away. "Then what were you doing?" "I do not know," Jameson said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. This was supposed to be simple. Pretend for a few days, close the deal, go back to normal. But nothing about this feels simple anymore. Ruby wrapped her arms around herself. "I feel the same way." "What do we do about it?" Jameson asked. "I do not know," Ruby whispered. Jameson stepped closer to her. "Ruby, I need to know something. If we were not boss and assistant, if this was not complicated, would you want this to be real?" Ruby looked up at him, seeing vulnerability in his eyes that she had never seen before. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. "Yes," she finally said. "I would." Jameson exhaled slowly. "Then maybe we should stop pretending." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe we should see where this goes. After the deal closes, after we get back home, no more acting. Just us figuring out if this could actually work." Ruby's heart raced. That is a huge risk. What if it does not work out? What if it ruins everything we have built professionally? What if it does work out? Jameson countered. What if we are walking away from something real because we are too afraid to try? Ruby bit her lip, torn between caution and hope. Jameson reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You do not have to answer now. Just think about it." He started to walk back toward the hotel, but Ruby called out to him, "Jameson." He turned back. "I will think about it. I promise." He nodded, a small smile on his face, and walked away. Ruby stood on the beach alone, the sound of waves filling the silence. For the first time in her carefully planned life, she was considering taking a leap into the unknown, and the scary part was that it felt right. The final Datha. Next morning brought a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness for Ruby. She had barely slept. Replaying her beach conversation with Jameson over and over in her mind, his question echoed constantly. What if we are walking away from something real because we are too afraid to try? The final investor meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. Once the contract was signed, their fake relationship would have served its purpose. The question was whether they would let it end there or take the terrifying step of making it real. Ruby got dressed carefully, choosing a professional navy suit that made her feel confident. She needed all the confidence she could get for what was promised to be an emotionally charged day. When she arrived at the conference room, Jameson was already there, reviewing documents. He looked up when she entered, and their eyes met across the room. In that brief moment, so much passed between them without a single word spoken. "Good morning," Ruby said, keeping her voice professional despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Good morning," Jameson replied. "Ready for the big moment?" "As ready as I will ever be." The investors arrived promptly, and the meeting proceeded smoothly. Patricia Green and the Caldwell Group representatives were all smiles, clearly pleased with the terms of the merger. After 2 hours of final details and discussions, the moment finally came. "I think we are ready to sign," Patricia announced. Picking up her pen, Ruby watched as signatures were added to the contract, making the deal official. Months of work, countless meetings, and one very unexpected fake relationship had all led to this moment. The merger was complete, success and uncertainty after the meeting. There was a celebratory lunch where everyone congratulated each other on the successful partnership. Ruby smiled and made small talk, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept catching Jameson watching her from across the room, his expression thoughtful. When the lunch finally ended and the investors dispersed to prepare for their flights home, Ruby found herself alone in the hotel lobby. Unsure of what came next, Ruby. She turned to find Jameson approaching. His jacket slung over his shoulder and his tie loosened. He looked tired, but relieved. "We did it," he said. "The deal is done." "We did," Ruby agreed. Patricia seemed very happy with everything. She actually thanked me privately for being open about our relationship. Said it showed character and balance. Ruby laughed softly. If only she knew the truth. Jameson stepped closer. "What is the truth, Ruby?" Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, was it all pretend? These past few days, the way we have been together, was any of it real for you?" Ruby took a deep breath. This was the moment. She could play it safe, laugh it off, go back to being just his assistant. Or she could be brave. "It started as pretend," Ruby said slowly. "But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like acting. When you held my hand, when we danced, when we talked on the beach last night, that was real. At least for me." Jameson's eyes searched hers. "For me too." Taking the leap, the admission hung between them, changing everything and nothing all at once. "So what do we do now?" Ruby asked. Jameson ran a hand through his hair. A gesture Ruby had learned meant he was working through something complicated. "I have been thinking about this all night. About us, about the risks, about what could go wrong." Ruby's stomach clenched. Here it came. The logical reasons why this could never work, but Jameson surprised her. "I realized something. I have spent my entire life making careful, calculated decisions. Every business move, every investment, every relationship has been analyzed and planned. But with you, I do not want to be calculated. I want to take a chance." Ruby felt tears prick her eyes. Jameson. "I want to try this, Ruby. Really try. Not fake dating for investors, but real dating. You and me, figuring out if what we feel could become something lasting. I know it is complicated with work, and I know it is scary, but I think you are worth the risk." A tear slipped down Ruby's cheek. "I think you are worth the risk too." Jameson reached out and gently wiped the tear away with his thumb. "So is that a yes?" "Yes," Ruby said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I want to try this with you." The smile that spread across Jameson's face was the most genuine one Ruby had ever seen from him. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I have wanted to do this since the moment you walked into the wrong room," he murmured against her hair. Ruby pulled back slightly to look up at him. "Really? Even when I was drunk and completely mortified?" "Especially then. You were adorable. I was a disaster. You were human, real. It was the first time I saw you as more than just my incredibly competent assistant." Ruby shook her head, smiling. "Leave it to me to catch your attention by accidentally sleeping in your bed." Jameson's expression turned serious. "Ruby, I need you to know something. This changes things between us, but I never want you to feel like your job is dependent on our relationship. If this does not work out romantically, you will always have a place in my company. Your talent and dedication earned you that position, not anything else." "I appreciate that," Ruby said softly, "but I believe we can make this work. It will not be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." "Wise words," Jameson said, then added with a hint of mischief, "Now, can I finally kiss you properly?" "I have been wanting to since that dance," Ruby laughed. "I thought you would never ask." The real first kiss. Jameson cupped her face gently in his hands and leaned down slowly, giving Ruby plenty of time to change her mind. But she did not want to change her mind. She had never been more certain of anything. When their lips finally met, it was nothing like Ruby had imagined. It was better. The kiss was soft and sweet at first, then deepened with all the emotion they had been holding back. It was a kiss that said everything words could not express: hope, fear, excitement, and promise all mixed together when they finally broke apart. Both were breathless. "Wow," Ruby whispered. "Agreed," Jameson said, resting his forehead against hers. That was worth waiting for. They stood there in the hotel lobby, wrapped in each other's arms, not caring who might see them. The pretending was over. This was real, messy, complicated, and absolutely right. New beginnings, a week later. Back in their home city, Ruby and Jameson navigated their new relationship carefully. At work, they maintained professionalism, though it was harder now to ignore the electricity between them. They kept their relationship private from the office for the time being, wanting to build a solid foundation before dealing with workplace gossip. But outside of work, they explored what it meant to be together. Real dates, not business dinners. Conversations about life, dreams, and fears, not just quarterly earnings. Laughter without an audience. Quiet moments without pretense. Ruby discovered that Jameson was nothing like the cold, distant boss everyone assumed he was. He was thoughtful, surprisingly funny, and deeply caring once he let his guard down. He loved old movies, could not cook to save his life, had a secret passion for jazz music. Jameson learned that Ruby was not just efficient and professional, she was creative, adventurous, and had dreams beyond her career. She wanted to travel the world, learn pottery, and maybe write a book someday. They learned each other slowly, carefully, building something real on the foundation of their unexpected beginning. The confession at the office 3. Months into their relationship, they decided it was time to be open about their relationship at work. They scheduled a private meeting with the HR department to ensure everything was properly documented and there were no conflicts of interest. "We've been seeing each other for a few months now," Jameson explained to the HR director. "We want to be transparent about our relationship and make sure we are following all company policies." The HR director smiled. "I appreciate your honesty. We will need to document this and ensure there are no reporting conflicts. Ruby, you may need to report to someone else directly to avoid any perception of favoritism." "I understand," Ruby said. "I want to make sure my work is judged on its merits, not on my personal relationship." "We will work out the details," the HR director assured them. "But I am happy for you both." Office romances can be tricky, but when handled with maturity and professionalism, they can work out beautifully. After the meeting, Ruby felt a weight lift off her shoulders. No more hiding, no more sneaking around. They could be themselves, both at work and outside of it. Looking forward 6 months after that fateful night in Miami, Ruby and Jameson sat on the balcony of his apartment, watching the sunset over the city skyline. Ruby was curled up against him, a blanket wrapped around them both. "Do you ever think about that night?" Ruby asked. "When I stumbled into your room?" Jameson chuckled. "All the time. Best mistake you ever made. I was so embarrassed. I wanted to disappear. I was terrified," Jameson admitted. "Not because you were there, but because of how I felt when I saw you. Like something had shifted and I could not put it back." Ruby turned to look at him. "Do you regret any of it? The fake dating? The complications? All of it?" Jameson kissed her forehead. "Not for a second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Ruby Thompson. Even if you did break into my hotel room drunk." "I did not break in. The door was open." "Sure it was," Jameson teased. Ruby swatted his arm playfully, then settled back against him. "I love you, you know." It was the first time either of them had said those words. Jameson went still for a moment, then tightened his arms around her. "I love you too," he said quietly. "I think I have loved you since that morning when you woke up smiling in my bed, even though you had no idea where you were. That is possibly the strangest declaration of love ever," Ruby laughed. "We are a strange couple," Jameson pointed out. "But we work." "We do," Ruby agreed. "We really do." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ruby thought about how one wrong turn, one mistaken door, one embarrassing morning had led to the best thing in her life. She had walked into the wrong room that night in Miami, but in doing so, she had walked into exactly where she was meant to be, with Jameson Blake, the millionaire boss who had fallen hard for his assistant and who she had fallen just as hard for in return. Sometimes the best love stories started with the biggest mistakes. And Ruby and Jameson were living proof that sometimes getting lost was the only way to find what you were truly looking for. Epilogue. 1 year later, year after that fateful night, Ruby and Jameson returned to the Ocean Pearl Resort in Miami, but this time they were not there for business. They were there for themselves. They walked along the same beach where Jameson had asked Ruby to stop pretending. The same beach where they had decided to take a chance on something real. Jameson stopped walking and turned to face Ruby. In his hand was a small velvet box. "Ruby Thompson, a year ago, you accidentally walked into my hotel room and changed my life forever. You challenged me, surprised me, and showed me what it means to truly live, not just exist. I do not want to spend another day without you, as my partner in every sense of the word." He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring that caught the moonlight. "Will you marry me?" Ruby's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Yes, of course I will marry you." Jameson slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss that felt like coming home. When they broke apart, Ruby laughed through her tears. "We're going to have to tell people our love story started with me drunkenly passing out in your bed." "It is a great story," Jameson said, grinning. "Unconventional, embarrassing, and absolutely perfect. Just like us." Ruby could not argue with that. Their love story was not conventional. It did not start with love at first sight or a romantic meet-cute. It started with a mistake, evolved through pretending. It became real when they were brave enough to take a risk. But it was theirs. Messy, complicated, beautiful, and real. And Ruby would not change a single moment of it. As they walked back to the hotel, hand in hand, engaged and blissfully happy, Ruby thought about all the twists and turns that had led them here. One wrong door had opened up a whole new life. Sometimes the best adventures began with getting lost. And sometimes the person you were meant to find was waiting in the last place you expected to look. For Ruby and Jameson, that place was a hotel room in Miami, where a drunken mistake became the beginning of their forever.